Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just wait for the others to join John, because then at least he's not alone in the battle he's going to face. Not from me. I just wanted to add, not from me. So just wait for John. Is John Crawford coming back as well?
John's had to go. But
Okay.
you can, yeah, if he
Just
went
the
in.
two that we've got here.
That's it.
John, just you and Ross? Kapai. Oh, plus also Peter. So look, question is around, I'll just get to all my notes. Okay. So, okay, here it is. Yep, 130 on the mirror proposal. And what it's got there is just protection of our intergenerational assets, John and Ross. Also 131. Can you please tell me the makeup of the fund managers, what discussion has taken place in regards to the composition, please?
Through you, Chair, so no discussion to date on likely fund managers. If this eventuated, Council will do an RFP for fund managers, or fund manager or managers, and they would help define what essentially assets, so what underlying funds you'd go into, whether they be New Zealand overseas stocks, bonds, real assets, infrastructure assets, that sort of thing.
So we've been advised by the Mayor that the airport shares will be going in there. If it comes through and it gets approved next year. So there's a word in here called capitalise, and it's got initially capitalised with the council's remaining shares. The Mayor has said that that doesn't mean selling. What does capitalise mean, so then I understand it from my perspective, or yours really, John?
So through you, Chair, so capitalised effectively means they'd be transferred into the fund. And then, as was stated before, any future decision to sell down all or part of those shares would be done in association with the fund managers in conjunction with the agreed investment objectives and policy.
Who will have the final say on whether the airport shares or the shares we have in the airport will be sold or not?
Through you, Chair, it would be essentially with the governance over that structured of the fund in association with the professionally appointed fund managers.
So there wouldn't be any, or the decision wouldn't be with the governing body?
Through you, Chair, no, the decision of the government, we need to change obviously the shareholding policy to reflect this, but the decision of the governing body would be to set up the fund and transfer the shares. Once they're into the fund, it would be outside of the governing body, and that's quite deliberate, so then the governors of the fund and the fund manager can time the market, so it's not such a public event as was the case with the 7% sell down.
So with ACIL, I know that was formed as a result of the amalgamation in 2010. And then in the LTP 2018 to 2028, it was then consultation went out for the disestablishment of ACIL. When ACIL was part of, was a CCO, final decision on any sale of shares, was that with the governing body because it was a CCO?
Through Chair, I understand that if ACIL, for example, had wanted to sell those shares, that would have required governing body approval.
Okay, and obviously because we don't know the makeup of the fund manager, who will be part of, whether it be from the independent. I know that John Crawford mentioned at a workshop that the independent advisors is so crucial from his perspective, and I know that there's been some discussion from the investment political working group around that. Surely, if this fund is set up, there is an ability for the terms of reference for it to come back to the governing body as a final say.
Through you, Chair, that's always a possibility. It's not one that we'd recommend. I mean, I think the whole intention of transferring those shares into the fund would be to liquidate those shares at some stage and get into a more diversified range of financial assets, because that's what this fund is trying to achieve. It's trying to move away from having all our eggs in one or two baskets.
So, and I know that Councillor Fletcher is the chair, and I mean, for the work and also getting John on board, Councillor Fletcher, again, as I said in the workshop, I'm here to you for that. If there's any recommendations, I know there were some recommendations that were formed from the working party, and can you tell me whether those recommendations were put to the governing body who set up the working party?
Through you, Chair, I'll let Councillor Fletcher answer that.
I was going to suggest that Max Hardy or one of the Mayor's office talk to the establishment of the working parties and the scope that they had for making recommendations.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. The origin of the working party, particularly the Investments Working Party, which is a little bit different from the other working parties, was because its origin was in fact in the governing body resolution that was passed as part of the budget decision making. So, I know the council is aware of that resolution. It's a public resolution that essentially committed the council to establishing that working party. So I suppose the answer to your question is about who established that. It was pursuant to that governing body resolution.
Yeah, my part-time Max was whether the recommendations from that investment political working party, whether that was going to be shared when they came out as a draft in the end, 23rd of November. Are you saying that, well, one, are you confirming that they weren't forwarded through to the governing body?
The decisions of the Investments Working Party the minutes of the meeting have been circulated this morning to the Budget Committee, I believe. So the discussion at the Investments Working Party, take a step back, the first task the Investments Working Party looked at was the scope of the future fund, whether that was a good idea, and what its purpose, functions, what sort of protections you would want in place to do that. So that was its first task, and it received some initial legal advice on that question, as well as the input from Mr. Crawford. So, and as part of that discussion, made some during the meetings, part of that discussion was then used to inform the Mayor's proposal. So there was no resolution passed in the end by the Investments Working Party that went into the proposal, but there was a formulated recommendation which went to all the members, and we received feedback from all the members of the Investments Working Party to inform the Mayor's proposal relating to the future fund. The next task the Investments Working Party looked at was the role of obtaining some independent contestable advice on two things: on the future fund and on the options relating to the port. And that work culminated in a meeting 2 days ago, I believe, which you attended, councillor, and at that meeting there was a unanimous decision made in relating to who would be the person that we would commission to do that independent advice, and a recommendation around the scope of that advice. And so that, and those minutes which were recorded, and a formal decision was made at the working party, or recommendation was made at the working party, those have been circulated to the budget committee yesterday.
Yeah. So Max, just last question for you. I know that the minutes, and I've read the minutes from the governing body, dated the 29th of June 2023, and the Auckland Council Investments, which ended up being the political party. Did you know that one of the steps in there was that the mayor will report back to the next governing body meeting on the decisions in a separate paper? Did you know that that was passed through the minutes? I can send them to you if you wish.
So following the governing body resolutions in June, which established the working, which is basically directed the establishment of a working party, there was a subsequent decision by the governing body. So the mayor put forward a paper that went to the next governing body meeting, which referred to this working party, the membership of it, its scope, as well as a range of other working parties which were then established, which included the revenue working party, one relating to stadiums and stuff. So yes, I'm aware that the next step was another decision of the governing body, and that's what occurred, I think.
Yeah, and so at least, so because I've got draft, but can I, through you, may I just address my question to Councillor Fletcher? Councillor Fletcher, with the draft recommendations from our political working party that came to us all, and not to the governing body, and that was dated
Councillor
the 20th,
Filipino, are you talking about the
23rd of November? There was some, I've got the email, but there was some draft recommendations, and I just wanted to sort of see if maybe that could be sent to the members. If not, as you being the chair, I won't end up doing that.
I'm very happy for whatever minutes. I'm aware that Mike Giddy, who is the committee secretary, on the Monday, when we were talking about information that would come here, was required to be out on Waiheke for the Hauraki Golf Forum. So he was somewhat stretched, and I think Jazz Singh took the minutes and directions. So if there was an oversight, I apologise profusely, and I know I'm apologising on behalf of Mike because he wasn't there, and I know that he was at the audit committee until 6:30 last night. But I will very happily forward you any information that I have, and that can be available. There's absolutely no intention but to provide all information, because this is such an important decision. One of the biggest challenges was to await, and it's relevant whether we decide to proceed or not proceed today, but to review the work that we received from Flagstaff. And we were awaiting from John Bishop, and he can confirm it. He was to confer, we delegated the authority to the two Johns to come up with recommendations. And that was quite a difficult task, because they had to find individuals from the pool of people who might be available that would not be having an ongoing interest in this matter. And so that was, and I know that you had the Open Space Working Party, we've all been working really hard, and there's been a bit of an overlap, but that was the suggestion that was put forward, was agreed unanimously, and officers are pursuing that, because that's a really important body of work for us.
I totally agree.
Thank you.
So I'll show it to you before I release anything to the others, and then at least you have oversight. In regards to the enhanced status quo, John and Ross, have we got currently any information that can go out to our community, or will you, as you've already said, wait until you get that information around the pros and cons of an enhanced status quo?
So there's a lot of information on the agenda today. And 3 workshops. It's a big pile of stuff, so that is all public. So what we've got is enough information to get for this part of the process. And then, as John and others have talked about, there'll be work to get more information, refine, adapt, verify, check, and all that information will feed into the consultation documents. And the very nature of that is to go out to all Aucklanders. So they've got full information over the course of that consultation period. We wouldn't be looking to put out anything in advance with the public, that would sort of conflict or overlap with that main consultation process.
And last one, Chair. Ross, just on the consultation, the peer review of, 2 more questions now, sorry. The peer review of, who are those fellas again? Flagstaff, that's the one. Is that also going to be available, or is it amongst all the papers you just held up, Ross?
Through you, Chair, so that's the terms of reference for the review of Flagstaff, or the actual review of Flagstaff's work?
Well, I know we had through, again, the chair, that we had John sort of have a look through it and everything else, but it would have been good to also share whatever information that he had with the rest of the governing body. I don't know whether there's any, and I know that, peer review of the Flagstaff information or contestable was something that was asked for.
Through you, Your Worship, there is a person that is a preferred candidate for this work. There was one matter raised quite properly by one of the members of the Working Party on a potential conflict. That issue is just being resolved, and once that matter is resolved, there will be some contractual situation. And I'm not sure, is this person coming through the mayoral office or whether it's coming through the GB? We need to clarify that. I don't know the answer to it here, but I think it's through the mayor's office. And then all of the briefing notes in and around that will be made available to all members of this budget committee, because they need to have that information. And what is very clear is that there may be matters that we can't yet anticipate, and that was the question I posed to John Crawford. How are we going to have sufficient scope to be able to raise matters as they might emerge? Because certainly the circumstances around the port and the port's profitability have changed since the time that Flagstaff report was commissioned. And so it's a matter for which we need to be able to have ongoing visibility. And there is a complete intention, certainly by myself, to make sure all councillors have access to that information.
Thank you. Last one, through you, Mayor. Is Flagstaff advice that they've given us, is that still confidential? Because my question was going to be based on maybe not what they've put out, but I was going to ask a question. I don't want to end up getting you, John or Ross, to end up saying anything that would be confidential. And my question would be, and this is even, so you at least you know the context, my question will be on the lease of the port and who to. So I don't know whether that's restricted information. It is? I mean, not the name, Max, before you, not the name. No, I don't want to talk about name. My question, and please let me know, is going to be, would there be any restrictions on who would lease the land over the 35-year period?
To answer the last question, so it's the lease of the operations. Of course, you can put restrictions around who you could lease it to. That obviously diminishes the pool of available parties and is likely to have a significant impact on value.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Foley, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. Most of my questions have been asked and answered by other councillors before me, so I've just got a couple of small questions. One is around the $2 billion upfront payment for the lease and how certain that is. Is that your best guess based on all the circumstances and information before us, or has there been an offer made?
Through you, Chair, there's been no offer made. It's based on analysis by Flagstaff, based on their experience in doing these transactions, market conditions, based on information about the port and that sort of thing. So it's only an estimate.
Okay, so it's an estimate, thank you, that's what I was getting at. So, like other councillors, I would be really keen to have some really strong, robust terms in that lease deed that would include making sure that the health and safety of the workforce can be secured, and then also certainty of jobs, of course, for Aucklanders, some social procurement targets like the ones we've got in our other council contracts, and also te tiriti principles as well, and climate change and sustainability commitments and things like that. So thinking about those kinds of terms, which may be quite different to what other countries in the past have required in their leases, can you give us a best guess of the effect that would have on the $2 billion? Can you guess as to how much that would be, that figure might come down?
Through you, Chair, look, I can't give you a figure. The only thing I can say is a pretty general comment, which is fairly obvious, is that the more restrictions we put on there, that the more the value is likely to come down.
Can I just, I think, add to that answer as well? So the advice that we did receive, and we had a couple of workshops about from with Flagstaff, where they went through the methodology they used to value what a company would possibly give us for the port lease, and the estimate we've used here is at the lower end of that, of what they would estimate the value. So we've been conservative in terms of understanding what the possible value of that lease would be. They also said that the types of protections that you're talking about in terms of employment protections for workers, health and safety and the environment, as well as some protections around prices, are common in the types of leases that they have seen overseas, and were assumed within, some sorts of those types of those protections were assumed in the way that they valued the port lease. That's my understanding. So it is definitely, the more you go, the more restrictions you apply, you do impact the value, no question. But there is certainly some protections implied within the evaluation that's being used there around employment.
Through you, Your Worship, this is a matter that Councillor Filipaina can confirm that we explored quite thoroughly. And there was a real concern, certainly in my case, that the port operates in the waters of the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. So, we have a whole range of things that we sought. And we weren't given any information that any of those restrictions would further devalue the assumptions that we were working from, but we didn't explore whether it would just be a New Zealand-based operator. So that is something that we did not explore, but I can say to you that we were given to understand, as Max has already confirmed, that amount of money was at the very conservative end, and the advisors, and I'll let John speak to that, but John Crawford and John Bishop met with Flagstaff, they met with the Port of Auckland, and they have had the opportunity to do some research of their own, but given the importance of that, they advised having an independent reviewer, because we really need to have the confidence of knowing, in terms of contestable policy advice, if ever, that on this one, we're dealing with the best possible information. So the only thing that was not explored, and Councillor Filipaina can confirm this, is the fact that we didn't talk about putting within the lease a restriction that it be solely a New Zealand-based party. We didn't consider that.
Kia ora, thank you. That's all my questions, Your Worship.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next lot. Thanks very much for all those questions and the long answers. You've given a fair old thrashing, eh? Oh, sorry. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it just goes to the notion of the fund and, of course, the sale of these assets that were going into this fund and the protection that's been signalled. And I say that in the context, of course, where in the past we have had a fund exactly like this, diversified assets, that was not only sold, but the entity that oversaw it was disestablished. So, that's the clear historical background. In the Mayor's paper, he refers to the setting up of some sort of trust that would provide protection for this fund going forward. So, obviously, a lot of normal trusts, they usually have a, kind of 80-year period. What we also hear in this council a lot is that, the ability or the inability to bind future council. So in terms of the trust, with the council as trustee, I'm assuming that while the protection would exist as long as that trust was in place, if there was a decision or a view of a future council to wind up the trust for whatever reason, that would be an option that would be available.
Through you, I can't really comment on that. I'm not an expert on trust law, but what I would say, and it comes through the Price Waterhouse initial advice, is that there needs to be further work done on the governance, legal protection, tax position, all that sort of stuff to better inform you when we get to the end of January, beginning of February.
Okay, so I guess just for putting things in context, I've referred to the diversified assets portfolio, and obviously we're looking to keep faith with the public. Certainly in the past, where, and this might be more of a political issue, it was almost unthinkable that any sale of the airport shares or any sale or leasing of the port would be done without electoral mandate. That certainly has been the case with the previous mayoralties. What protection then, given this, the background that we've had already with a similar portfolio, going out for this consultation, what are we going to be saying to the public, given their clear experience, both in this term, where suddenly major assets that previously have been the result of, legacy councils and kind of gentleman's agreement, if you want for a better word, in terms of their status and what's required, to change the position on that. I guess the notion of the trust or whatever other mechanism would have to be far clearer and far more convincing than the couple of lines that we've got in here. That's maybe a comment rather than a question, I think.
Your Worship, perhaps I can answer that because it's again an issue that was explored. If you go back to the fund that you're talking about, they came out of the legislative change of what was Infrastructure Auckland. And it required legislation to wind that up, and it all came into the amalgamation legislation. And I was concerned, for the very reasons that you're outlining, that this could all just get rolled over. If the trust was formed in the way that we have had advice thus far, and I think it's really important we await the PwC advice, that I believe would not be able to be overturned unless it was by legislation again and you had some intervention, parliamentary intervention, that would enable that to happen. because once the legislation was passed by Rodney Hyde, that brought all of the legacy councils' involvement, that overrode other legislation. And, you know, it's a point that's also included in the Merrill proposal that we are going to at some stage have to, because it didn't deal with the ARAFA legislation, and that's something that we're going to pursue separately. But the concerns that you've got there, and maybe Max can speak to it in terms of the briefing that PwC have been given, we'll explore these very things. But I know that the only reason they were able to be wrapped up, Infrastructure Auckland, that was because of the legislative intervention at the time.
Well, I guess the related part is yes, there was a fund, but then there was the disestablishment of ACIL itself, where its shareholdings to the council were transferred and its functions absorbed. So there's two parts to it. There's a fund, and then there's what happened to the entity itself that was managing that fund. So I don't need information at the moment because it's clear it doesn't exist in that extent, but I would just say, given that track record, I'd imagine that in consultation, if people have got any sense, they'll be asking questions about that, because I'm sure I would be.
Can I just briefly address the question, which is a good one, and to Councillor Fletcher's point. So this was a matter that was raised and discussed at the Investments Working Party, which was and which the party was, the working group received initial legal advice on, in terms of the level of protection that could be applied, and there is a range. There's a range. At a low level of protection, you just say this is what you're going to do, and that was kind of the level of protection that was granted to the Diversified Investment Fund in the end, and it was a matter for resolution of the governing body to determine whether that proceeded or not. Another level would be designating it a strategic asset, which requires a certain level of consultation before a process has to happen, and that's the level of protection that ACIL had, and the airport shares have at the moment. But at a different level, a trust actually, a standalone trust or a trust type entity actually provides greater level of protection for these assets than currently exist with respect to the airport shares and Ports of Auckland, because a trust is a legal entity, which and there is you have a possibility of binding your successors to some extent in terms of their ability to use those assets. So a trust is a different level of protection. Obviously, at a different level, legislative instruments are available as well, which would provide that greater level of protection and require parliamentary intervention before decisions could be made. But that's not basically where the Investments Working Group landed. Was that protection was very important. That a trust was the initially preferred structure, but that further advice is required. So, and definitely that will need to be addressed in the consultation material.
Thanks for that. I might point out I'm not actually a member of that working party. I'm just taking advice from them. Councillor Philippine tells me he's got a last little one, and Mr. Newman can't resist himself either, and then we might get on to the other stuff.
Thank you, Chair. And this question now is more relevant after hearing Max say what he said, which is, will the information go out for consultation around the setting up of the fund to say that the governing body will not have the approval to sell shares or not? Or is it going out just to say, let's set up the Auckland Future Fund? Because from what I've just heard from Max, the better protection will be that the governing body has the ability to say yes or no than the trust. So thank you, Ross.
The consultation documents will have to be really clear about what could or couldn't happen with any of the assets, and it'd have to make clear those governance arrangements and those protections. So it'll be very clear on all those details.
Clear that the governing body won't, as long as that's going out, that the governing body will not have the approval to sell or not to sell those shares. That's all, as long as it's clear from what you said. Yep, thank you.
Sorry, if I could ask for some clarification on that. I couldn't follow the question, sorry. Can we just have another go for
Yep,
Mr.
so
Whitty here?
Peter, what I've just heard, and sorry, Councillor Fletcher, I know you want, what I've just heard is that the best place for protection for the airport shares is in this mechanism about having a trust. My thoughts are, and this is why I've asked, my thoughts are is that because it's an asset, and that the ability to say whether we sell or not should be made by elected members in Tāmaki Makaurau, the Kaunihera. So that's the point. Is that going to be spelt out clearly to our community to say that if this is set up, that the governing body will not be able to approve the sale or not of the airport shares or even any of the assets that go into that fund?
I can give you the preliminary response as a member of the working party, and then you need my understanding of this. If the objective is to diversify and to sort of minimise risk, to create a standalone trust where the assets are transferred into that. Now then, once those assets are there, it will be for those responsible for the trust as to how they might release them. It will not then come back to the governing body. And therefore that information is really important, as you say, to be made clear within any disclosures around the consultation document. I don't want anyone misled on this. As I understand it, if a trust is created and we put should we go down the path of a lease for the port or whatever we might do, and whatever assets in the future we may choose to put in it, might be golf courses, whatever we do, once they're transferred, then it is over to those responsible for that trust as to how they are used. And Max, can you confirm that, because that's what I have understood?
Yeah, no, completely. It's completely accurate, and I just want to add. I wasn't saying what's better or worse in terms of protection. I was saying that there is a spectrum of protection. There are different options around protection that you can make. But the decision about whether to put the asset in the future fund is a matter for the governing body to make, and that's, I suppose, the important decision.
Okay. So as it stands, we could sell them, but if it was in a trust, we couldn't. So they get better protected. Councillor Newman, please.
Thank you. So I think it's an interesting argument. The airport shares, you have to, because it is deemed to be a significant, in accordance with our policy on significance, we have to go through a special consultative process. With respect to the deed for the establishment of the trust, I know we're getting a bit hypothetical here. Is there an ability when establishing that deed to provide effectively entrenchment provisions whereby the deed requires the fund managers to hold the trust, the value of the trust investments at a certain value, so as, for example, if it started out with the initial portfolio of assets worth 4 billion, then it can't divest to a point where it drops below that amount. Is there an ability to effectively entrench the value of the trust, noting that yes, it has to obviously take risks, but as a long run asset, can this be preserved? Can this be entrenched? Is there an ability to protect it from the ebb and flow of what future councils may wish to do with respect to the trust deed, or is there no protection that could apply in relation to that deed?
Could I just give an example of a trust that exists at the moment? It's worth a huge sum of money, and various councils, including this council, have tried to crack into it and made no progress whatsoever, and that's the Auckland Electricity Consumers Trust. Okay? And so, I mean, we are the beneficial owners of that in another 40 odd years. And several councillors in the past, have attempted to crack that and have made no progress whatsoever. So can we set up a trust which is unbreakable? So easy. There's one in Auckland already, and all of you, and if you happen to be in the right part of Auckland, are beneficiaries already of that trust. So I do want to kill this off and get on with the rest of the day. Richard Hills has got a hand up. It better be a good question.
It was just a brief. Hang on. It wasn't answered. I mean, you gave me your view. I was going to ask someone else to give their view.
Well, I think that's a practical view, that it exists.
Well, I don't really care. I want someone else to give me their opinion because you and I have a vote on the matter, but I'd like someone else to answer.
Chief Financial Officer.
I think the answer is that we're getting advice on that exact point as to how we could best set up the principles and objectives of that fund. So you've seen the initial PwC advice and you've seen the recommendations from Political Working Group. That's adequate for this point in time, but there'll be more required before you go out to consultation in February.
One of the responsibilities will be that we have to define the purpose of the trust, to make sure if we're really serious about climate resilience, that we specify what the purpose is in self-insurance. And once that purpose is established, it's very, very hard to change it.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Hills. Oh.
Yeah, I think I may be helpful, maybe not, but it feels like there's an assumption that the point of this is hiding the fact that the trust could sell the airport shares. My understanding is the whole point is, say if it was $1 billion worth of airport shares would go into the trust, that trust would then decide whether that $1 billion was better invested in the airport or a bunch of other things that would make far higher dividends than what they believe the airport is. I wasn't talking about your question, I was just talking about the general theme of, so my if I could have it confirmed, is my understanding that we would say, as maybe Councillor Newman said, that we do not want this fund to reduce from 1 billion or 4 billion or 3 billion or something, but in the meantime, you can invest in those airport shares you can invest in whatever ways to increase the revenues as you see fit.
So you, Chair, look, simple answer is yes. The whole point is to diversify your financial investments away from, this case, the airport, into a range of hundreds of thousands of different stocks, and that reduces your financial risk.
Yeah. But I guess my point is that that's what we're voting on, isn't it? Like, it's not, I just want to understand definitely that the vote would be the shares go into a trust and the trustees decide, look, the airport's okay, but actually these 5, 10, 100 different companies are actually far better for the council income.
That's the manager, the fund manager will make those. No, none of us around here have the skills or the interest to do that.
But instead of paying off debt or doing something else, we would say, we do not want this to drop below X, but we do want you to invest in stuff that makes us more money or less money.
Yes, you can do that. Right, I'd like to make a little bit of progress because we're getting tangled up in what is a relatively small part of the whole day, actually, just because it's something that is surprisingly new. I'll put the next few together because we've had a fair old thrashing of these things. There's nothing excitingly new about the local boards, community asset services and open space or regional facilities and development issues. Scroll down, please. Maori outcomes and water care. Those are, I'm going to take questions on all of those, if possibility, if you can stick to those ones. So that's, and Councillor Darby, you're away.
Quick one, Mayor. On water care, Mayor, you'll recall,
Go down to water care, please.
you'll recall
Opposition
when we
scroll.
discussed with water care at a workshop, we discovered, I raised some questions about the infrastructure growth charge recovery rate. I think it caught your attention too. 18 months ago, we were told the recovery rate for the infrastructure growth charges was moving from around about 70% to 100% by 2025. And that has changed dramatically without us being informed. Now, I know we can't direct water care to increase their IGCs, and I know it's not part of this budget, but I'm just taking this opportunity to find out how we can possibly recommend to water care that they stay on track to increase IGCs to 100%, which alleviates cross-subsidy from water consumers, Aucklanders buying water.
Well, I think one of the things we've learnt this year is when you put pressure on anything, they do better. Like the ports, everything else, they all do better. And one of the pressures is that we're not going to allow them to go above 340%.
I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about IGCs.
So that will put pressure on them to start gathering in the IGCs. I mean, I was shocked to find they weren't collecting the lot. And it's just a matter of not collecting the lot. And so I think that, and the Deputy Mayor, hello Deputy Mayor, you're attending water care tomorrow and we want to make sure, if you are, that we put pressure on them. They're not collecting all of their growth charges.
No, it's the rate of recovery. So currently they're not collecting at 100%, have never have. And the intention, Deputy Mayor, was to go to 100% by 2025. They're backtracking on that. So that means that the water consumer, every Aucklander consuming water, will be subsidising growth. So the recommendation, the soft recommendation, is for them to address a recovery rate commensurate with 100% so that water consumers are not subsidising.
If I could suggest something that's been forwarded through to me, we could put it in the letter of expectation that we expect greater IGC revenue, or even characterise that within the frame that we need it to be, as well as His Worship has pointed out, the pressure that is on them on the price space anyway.
You can go retrospective on that too. There's no reason why you can't go back and collect ones you should have collected as well. So that's a good point. Thank you for that. Well done. That's a good positive one. Alf Filipina is next, please.
Another positive one as well, Chair. Just around the parks, regional parks, and I just want to acknowledge Councillor Lee, who's the chair on that particular working group. Is there any indication where the regional park they were looking at will be in South Auckland? Because I've been looking for one for the last 30 years and I can't find one. But would that be more out down sort of Franklin ways?
Still South Auckland.
Oh, you're South Auckland now.
Yeah, yeah, that's all. I just wanted to sort of end up sort of having a look. Richard.
Mayor, I don't know if Councillor Lee wants to answer, but our discussion at the time was that there was a lack of access to large regional parks, forested parks in urban South Auckland, or the urban parts of, and Councillor Lee and others had put forward an idea. Could it be Drury? Could it be others? It may not be possible, but there would need to be a lot more discussion around, potential for that. Councillor Lee might want to answer instead. But.
Okay, we're keeping an eye out for one, Councillor Filipina. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question in the community asset services and open space around the sports and recreation facilities plan and the investment fund there, and whether the intention is, because this is talking about the infrastructure deficit for indoor sports facilities, whether that's intended to look at aquatic as well or not, just because aquatic's becoming an increasing issue. And I know we're waiting on the aquatic network plan. Is the intention to look at aquatic through that process or not?
I think we're just looking at, that's not ruled out aquatic at all. We're just saying here's a chunk of money and we're going to fund a facilities plan, and we'll start listening to all the people who've got their hands up for various things. And so I've done my best to avoid picking winners here. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Watson, please.
Yeah, thanks. This is really for you, Mr Mayor, and it goes to the regional facilities and development. I'm really just trying to get an understanding of what your proposal actually means, and this is with respect to North Harbour Stadium. I say that because just a few weeks back, we had this proposal put up by Tautaki Auckland Unlimited, which was, to demolish the stadium, 20 million just demolishing it alone, and various big chunks of money went off to other parts of the region stadium, Mount Smart, Western Springs and co. That suddenly changed then, and I think you said in your paper that you weren't accepting this. I'm not convinced that this proposal to demolish North Harbour Stadium and sell the land to invest in other stadium assets would have community support. So I don't think we should proceed any further, but something has to be done. So what the people in North Harbour are asking, Mr Mayor, and that they haven't really got a straight answer from anyone yet, does that involve demolishing the existing stadium stand that is essentially the substance of North Harbour? Yes or no?
It means yes or no. What happened was that got everyone's attention, and then we got a whole lot of people together. You got a group together, and a whole lot of group came and saw me subsequently to that, and I've been pressed by North Harbour Rugby. Basically, the general consensus was that it's not doing a very good job at the moment as it is, and what are we going to do? We can either spend a hell of a lot of money and hope that we get more people, which isn't going to happen, or we can look at some other things. And so a whole group, including Anna Atkinson, the local community board, local board leader, met with us and others, and we've just decided that we're going to consult on options, which are to do something really big with that, or change it around to get something more of a size that might get filled occasionally, and spend some money on indoor sports.
Okay, so something of a size, you mentioned, I think in your paper, 3,000 to 8,000. Yeah. So you're going to keep the big stadium and keep that? The big one goes,
My understanding is that that group are going to work out what they think the best to do is with that. So there's...
Are we going to have two stadiums there?
No, they might readjust that to become a smaller stadium.
Okay, all right, so that brings me on to my next question then.
The thing is that it just doesn't fill.
Okay, so that doesn't fill scenario, and talking to the chairman of the North Harbour Rugby Union then, was your decision on that, or your recommendation was that made in awareness of the independent governance review that's just completed into New Zealand Rugby and stadiums and crowds? Were you aware of that?
I'm generally aware of that because, I was a contributor to that through when I was on Northern Rugby Union, and the thing is that whole sector of our economy is characterised by wishful thinking of crowds that are not coming. And so a bit of realism's come through. I've had inputs from the chairperson of North Harbour, and I'm just recommending that we consult so the people over there come up with some self-funding solutions, utilising the assets that they've got, the underutilised ones and the spare ones, and coming up with a solution back to us. So it's a consultation document to tackle a problem. I've heard plenty loud and clear that they don't want to fund other areas, and so it's a...
Okay,
so the investigate options to make more out of North Harbour Stadium precinct is pretty well exactly what we're asking to do. We haven't predetermined anything.
Okay, so I'm talking about your boutique option, that this is the one that you're advancing here. So that review found that the average cost of staging NPC game is 400,000, so it's not sustainable. The average crowd is 2,000. At North Harbour, it's 1,500. So I'm trying to really do the maths on that, where you demolish the big existing stadium, you build another one of up to 8,000, and the crowd that's coming along is 1,500. To me, there seems to be a far more fundamental problem here that's not picked up in your any of your recommendations here as to the viability of this competition. New Zealand Rugby realise it. Why are you putting out a proposal that goes to build a new facility for a code that's only getting 1,500 people, and as part of this $400,000 a game cost that's not sustainable? What sense is there in that?
There's none at all, but I'm putting it out to up to, they wanted up to 8,000. I've been saying to them, do it 3,000, do it less. That whole sector is characterised by wishful thinking. You're far better off building it smaller and then having to correct it by building a bit more than building a huge one now and pulling it down, which is what they've got now. They've got a white elephant. It's a total white elephant. It'll never be filled in my life.
If it's 3,000, then you're doubling your capacity and you could use any suburban ground. The other thing you say, Mr Mayor, and it goes to the stadiums too, is I'm interested too in the recent idea that a smaller 20,000 seat stadium could be built somewhere in our waterfront. So we're getting told that we need to get rid of a stadium. We've demolished the newest stadium that they describe as the community, New Zealand's finest community-sized stadium. You get rid of that, you build a smaller one for a code that gets 1,500 people, and then you build another stadium down on the waterfront that will affect Mount Smart, Eden Park and everywhere else. So demolish one, build two. The numbers don't add up in that. I mean,
we're not talking about any of our money building it. I'm just there is a new soccer team coming here. They were offered make use of North Harbour, not interested. What we're saying is that no way is the ratepayer going to be funding any new stadiums anywhere.
Another stadium does affect your ratepayers because content will go to the new stadium.
Well,
do you realise that?
Going to that stadium there now over the shore. So you were at a meeting yesterday with Tataki. Can you just talk to them? They're the ones organising this.
Well, with all due respect, and I better not say I'll be getting assailed by various people. Tautac, since they took over, the fortunes of that stadium has dropped markedly, and what you've been told by people in the community is they want a change of governance. They want to go back to a trust that they had that had All Black tests, that had rugby league tests, that had concerts, that had NRL games before they came under Tautaki and its predecessor. Wouldn't that be the logical place to start, Mr Mayor? Start with that proposal?
We are offering to go to investigate options to make more out of North Stadium. One of those options, if the crowd come back and say they want to do exactly that and spend money and make it work, that'll be an option we'll consider.
Okay, so
at the moment, I want to go out and consult to find out. We've got a lemon. It may be fixed up by new magical management. It's going to produce wonderful audiences when hardly anybody watches footy games anymore over the North Shore. So there is a problem, and we're going to go out and consult and hear what their solutions are.
Well, that's great, and I guess, without prolonging things here, that's the essence of my questions here, is what you're going out with is confused, is contradictory, and it starts with the demolition. So it doesn't actually make sense as a piece of consultation. It's changing on the hoof, and you're going from a position of looking to contract to actually building more. That doesn't make any sense to the sports, doesn't make any sense to me, and it certainly doesn't make any sense to the near 500,000 people in the fastest growing sporting node in Auckland. And that's the reality of it, folks. The other stadiums are in settled areas and they're great stadiums, because I've fought over the last 10 years to protect all of them. Now the bottle's swung round at probably the last one they should be getting at, and we're going out with information that is all over the place. That's my point, Mr Mayor.
Well, the 229 to 235 actually just points out that a whole lot of things have to be sorted out, and we're going to go and consult with people, especially on the North Shore, on several options. Why it's confusing is the situation's confusing. Everybody over there's got an opinion. and we want to consult. I don't know what is your question?
My question is, why are you going out with information that doesn't take account of this very significant review that points to basically an unsustainable situation that you are using as your main justification for the 3,000 to the 8,000 seater? It's not going to be around because 1,500 people doesn't require a stadium. You know, that's self-evident to anyone. You get more to a good first 15 game.
Well,
So why are you doing
I
that?
think that I'm arguing in favour of an 8,000 seat stadium. I think it's daft as well. If we want to consult, what I'm saying is I'm not convinced the idea of demolishing and sell the land to it would have community sport, but something has to be done. The current stadium has become a white elephant. You've just agreed with that. Looking at the use and history makes sobering reading. And so it sets that, and it says, I do not propose to make new regional funding available, but there is a lot of assets over there, and the people over there can consult what they think the best is.
What makes sobering reading is what's happened to the stadium since RFA and Tautaki have taken it. That's what makes sobering reading. Why isn't the first proposal on that? That would be the logical one that would have financial benefit, would be supported by the community, but you haven't put in that.
Yeah,
that's the first place starting point.
233. The first option is the status quo, which would involve retaining the current stadium and investing in central renewals. Within this option, I'm open to considering how we improve the operational model for the stadium, including considering its management, which is just what you've asked for.
You don't improve the operation by demolishing the stadium.
I didn't say to demolish it. I've just said above there that I'm
I know you're not
convinced.
redevelopment.
Just try reading it. Within this option, I'm open to considering how to improve the operational model of the stadium, including considering its management. If a group of you can manage it better and bring people out,
Okay,
and pick out Sataki, that's something we'll consult on.
So I haven't got my thesaurus with me. What does redevelopment mean? Because the word demolition now is a banned word. In your proposal, am I hearing that you're taking off the prospects of demolition? That's a simple question.
One of the options is the status quo, which would involve retaining...
Option 2 we're talking about.
233.
Option 2.
The first option is the status quo, which would involve retaining and investing. Within this option, I'm open to considering how we improve the operational model, including its management. The second option is a consultant to redevelop North Harbour precinct. Not the stadium, we said the precinct. So if you read it there, everything you've suggested is on offer. So if you want to change some of the wording in there, come up with it. But basically, I'm asking the people over there to consider either a new management system for what's there, or in consulting, redeveloping parts of the stadium precinct. The precinct is the whole area around it.
The people over there have had 3 different proposals to consider in about 3 weeks. So we're just wondering what proposal it actually is that you back. It's
Look,
like a
I'm
moving
afraid,
feast.
look, I don't want to argue with you here. This is about questions. I believe we have answered, the options in my proposal allow for everything that you've asked for.
It's your preferred option that has been worked up since the Tautaki option that I'm directing my attention to. I'm fine with the option 1, but it's what's in your second option. That's the issue. And I've tried to point out the contradictions. I've tried to seek clarification in the simple question of demolition, because that's what concerns our community, but I'm not getting a straight answer.
No, yeah, I can probably answer the question for the councillor, because I think I've grasped it. And the first point, councillor, is that there isn't a preferred option being presented here. What the Mayor's suggesting is that we consult on 2 options. One involves the status quo with a suggested change in its with it being open to consider a change in the way it's managed. That's what I understand you've asked for, and that's the option 1. The second option which was something which was requested by members of the community. So I suppose just one step back in terms of an earlier comment you made, and I'd be remiss not to point this out, but Tātaki didn't propose, as a preferred option, I think, to demolish the stadium. They presented options to the governing body to consider, and that was one of the options they considered. They put forward. Option B, I think is what they called it.
That was their preferred option.
Okay, well,
Proposed sale of North Harbour Stadium, I'm reading it verbatim now,
Okay.
150
Can I
million,
just answer your
less
question, Councillor?
20 million provision for demolition costs. That's what they said, if we're going to talk words.
yeah, I just want to answer the question. So, but that's what. So Tātaki's just asked me to clarify that, but I take your point on that. The options here involve one, status quo with some changes potentially to its management, or two, redevelopment. Just to be clear about what the proposal is that the redevelopment proposal would be worked up with the community and who've expressed a desire to be able to put their heads together and essentially come up with something that uses the existing assets in a way that will improve things for the North Shore community in terms of the use of that precinct. So that they've expressed a desire to want to do that. What the Mayor has wanted to do was to give them the opportunity to do that. If they come up with something which is good and the people of the North Shore like it, then it can go forward. If they come up with something which is worse than the status quo, then it doesn't have to happen. But to be clear, there are two options, and it will really be a matter for the people of Auckland to decide. Yeah.
A point of clarification, what we haven't heard, Your Worship, is whether we're looking at this in a general way today, the principles that we're trying to get, that officers can work up this material. Will there be the opportunity for individual councillors, such as Councillor Watson, to work with officers to make sure that there is clarity around the options?
If you want to have, if we go ahead, which I imagine we will over this, all we're saying is we want to talk about better use of North Harbour, that if you want to make sure that the consultation material that goes out covers whatever it is you think is an option amongst it, because we've only selected A, B, C, D or E, and it says up to 8,000. I would be amazed if anyone was mad enough to spend more than 2,000 or 3,000, but if you want to have a word with an input to make sure that the consultation covers what you want to have in there, we just wanted a consultation with the people over there to get the best result from an open consultation with the people over there. Okay?
I'll reserve my right to speak on this.
All right. Councillor Newman, please.
Thank you.
Got a procedural motion. Hang on. We're now 4 o'clock. We've got to go on longer. Righto. Thank you. We're going to go on longer. Now, Councillor Newman.
Thank you. I had a question for Claudia, if she's in the room. She can make her way to the front. But just while she's coming up, Your Worship, look, I'm on that Stadia Working Party, and I've seen all the former mayors propose to fix Stadia, and they're all former. I wonder if there's still time to just back out of the North Harbour discussion, frankly, but that's just my view. Claudia, I had a question for you, and I have sought advice from the Mayor's office, but just to be very clear in relation to seismic and heritage funding, that the existing projects that are mandated under the regional work program for the next financial year, they have to proceed unless there is a specific resolution of the governing body that they shouldn't. Is that correct? There are a couple of projects in the regional work program in that directorate around seismic strengthening, which have funds allocated, and your teams are going out to contract now, which need to proceed, because the wording in the current mayoral proposal is, I propose to pause spending on seismic upgrades of the council assets. The problem is that your staff are emailing me to say, I'm not sure if we're doing this work or not.
So thank you for the question, and perhaps if I may also then direct it to the Mayor's office to provide their views to see if I'm correct and just to make sure that we're aligned. So my understanding is for the work that's currently underway, particularly when it's going out to contracting at the moment, that is likely to continue because of the potential implications of programs and the works underway under local board delegations. However, alongside that, we are then also going to consultation. So therefore, what happens subsequent to that consultation would then inform the long-term plan afterwards. Our teams are currently looking at the programs that may be affected by this and the timing of that, but I don't have that information immediately at hand, but I might have that later on this afternoon.
I mean,
Perhaps I could answer. I know you're particularly concerned about somebody's family house up in Manurewa. And I have been speaking to the Minister of Regulations. Things that are underway at the moment will just carry on unless the regulations suddenly change and we can do them a hell of a lot cheaper. But we're not going to stop things in the meantime. But I know the Minister of Regulation agrees with me that the imposition of ludicrously expensive seismic protection of old buildings in an area which hasn't had an earthquake for 100,000 years probably wouldn't meet the BC of 1 or even a BC of 0. So we're not going to hold up the Nathan Homestead, but we will be, if we can suddenly do it half the price, we'll do it half the price.
Your Worship, if I can just come back to you, Claudia. If there is an ECI contract already in place being worked up between the supplier and the architect to complete the works that have been funded, we will complete the works as per the contract, notwithstanding whatever the political view, ebb, flow, conversation that we're having at the moment. You will complete that contract and complete the work.
We have, if we have a legal obligation to continue the work and to complete the work, then we're most likely to recommend doing so because we would not want to add additional costs to council from potential legal aspects. But the seismic budget is quite large, as the Mayor has pointed out in the proposal, and so therefore there might be a timing aspect.
I'm not talking about the forward stuff, I'm talking about the current stuff subject to the ECI. The other question that I had...
Sorry, Councillor Newman, do you mind if I just clarify your question with Max or Claudia? Are the projects that we approved through the Planning, Environment and Parks Committee this year continuing as they were? As far as I understand, you're pausing any future work to come to us for new projects. Can I just have it confirmed the ones we've already approved are going forward?
The long-term plan is a plan in a budget. So the decisions which have been made, it's not actually a decision to do anything in particular. So the decision that has been made would actually rest with the local board, not with the Planning, Environment, Parks Committee, is not altered by the items that are before you today.
No, I just meant sort of the meeting of the regional projects, which included some.
Well, there was some funding allocated, but
yeah.
The decision on whether to proceed with the seismic strengthening of any particular local building is a decision of the local board, and you do not have the right, within the current governance framework, to change that decision, and that's not being proposed today.
Thank you.
But, Your Worship, but Max, it may well be the local board's decision, but it's a regional fund, and that's why it goes through that.
There's no decision for you today to change the allocation of the regional fund,
that.
as you know.
There is a degree of ambiguity in relation to the wording. You can tell me off later, but I want to get this clarified, Claudia, because it's important that we complete what we've started. The other question that I had, the Sport and Rec Facilities Plan 215B, I'm not sure that we should say 70% is no longer contestable. Not sure about that. But then at B it says assist with leveraging different funding available to from other organisations, brackets such as Licensing Trust and Foundation North, for priority projects. Can I get clarification as to, is that for the intention of supporting a mix of community-owned and council-owned facilities? Somebody knows? They don't know. If it's council-owned facilities, I'm just wondering if your office is aware that a number of those third-party funders have specific exclusions in relation to things that they won't fund, which will include council assets.
It's not actually true. I've been involved in very large projects which have been funded by a mixture, including Licensing Trust and Foundation North.
Okay, well,
And our council-owned facilities.
Yeah, well, I'm a trustee of a licensing trust, and I'd beg to differ on some of that. But I'm just so look, that's fine. We can have a discussion about that. But I just wonder if some advice could come back, if the officers could prepare some advice as to what exclusions do apply that may prevent some of the funding from the third-party funders being able to be allocated to council projects, because the Sport and Rec Facilities Investment Fund is a great fund for community-owned assets, and I suspect that the community, some of the applicants may be concerned about the fact that the majority of the funding is proposed to not be contestable. They might be excluded, but all right, we'll go out to consultation, presume it goes through, and we'll see what the public thinks.
Thank you. That's the point of it. Councillor Henderson.
G'day. So now for something completely different. Just one quick question. Did we consider partnering with local boards on playground upgrades and renewals as part of the proposal?
Not sure I understand the question. Partnering, don't we fund playgrounds and parks through the renewals budget, Councillor?
Yeah, well, as part of my sort of initial feedback was that we would look to, pay some regional money over to local boards to help them with their playground upgrades, because there's huge areas of need in that area. Just wondering if that was kind of looked into or whether it wasn't.
Suggesting something that they put in some of their funds and we put in some of ours.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that's pretty sensible. I don't think is that prevented at the moment? I think that was one of the examples we're trying to use of getting that local boards to actually think how they use their funds.
Yeah. No, it's like plus. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's cool. That answers my question. Thank you so much.
That doesn't need to be quoted on. I think we've just talked to the local boards. I tried to explain that was what we were trying to do. Thank you for that. Councillor Ferry.
Thanks. My question's just around the water care stuff. Just acknowledging this is a really tricky time for us to be putting something up for consultation in this space. And so what's our capacity to, we're going to sign off maybe today, maybe tomorrow on this, but then the material comes back to us in February to go out in February, March. We've got a real moving feast in this space. So what's our capacity to sort of legally change there in response to what some of the central government decisions might be? Or do we just sort of have to go, right, we just got to stick with something and,
I think it all comes back from June the 30th, end of the financial year. Tells us what we've got to do things, and so we've got to have a system in place by then.
Yeah, I guess my question is more about how do we consult on this effectively?
Yeah, great question. As you know, water care currently is by legislation outside of our long-term plan, so on that route we're not meant to be including it, but pragmatically that could change very quickly, so we need to be ready to include it when we need to. So, being part of audit and risk discussions yesterday, there was a large discussion at Audit and Risk yesterday on this very point around the pragmatic approach we're taking, which is, even though it's out by legislation at the moment, we're pragmatically including it because we expect that to change before we go out for consultation. Yeah.
I've had to
And we're
formally
working
ask
with
for a letter from the auditors to allow us to break the law by talking about something or other.
And we're
Okay.
working with DIA to make sure that they understand our processes as well.
Good question. Councillor Walker.
I've got some questions around the North Harbour Stadium, as you're proposing. Those questions go to issues like reputational damage and the like. So what I would convey is you had a whole lot of entities, foundations, people that raised money on weekends selling seats, $14 million. This council already has a crisis of confidence. When you take assets that people in the community have sweated over and built up, and they've seen those assets well used, very well used, and then they've seen that asset destroyed by a white elephant, and that white elephant is Auckland Unlimited, not the stadium. That is the white elephant. Then there is a high risk to this particular council that is talking about partnerships and other things everywhere, that people may not want to have a bar of us because we can't be trusted, we can't be relied on, we flip-flop, we put up information, we put up half-baked ideas, and that is essentially what we're looking at here. So, yes, my question is around the consideration of reputational risk, putting these sorts of things up, buying organisations off with lollies like multi-sports and facilities, when there
Let's go into consultation. No one's buying anything off.
alternative proposals to that. So I have a real concern.
Mayor, point of order, there's no question
I have a real
here.
concern, and this is my question, is if you are contemplating going out with something, then you need to tell the whole story, not a very biased
no
and
question.
limited
There's no question. Now
So
you're
that is
telling
my
me what to do.
question. Are we going to have the opportunity to tell the full story in what we go out with, including the white elephant, that is the present operation and management of that stadium,
still no question.
and the reconsideration of that? So how much are we going to be able to convey as it goes to your comment around, I think it's the alternative management or the like? I'm just looking for it here.
Okay, well, when you find a question, in the meantime, I'll go to Councillor Turner.
Well, that is the question. Whether we're going to have a genuine option around that, because it isn't particularly explicit. That is, how we can improve the operational model for the stadium. If you're going out with an option, that should be an option of taking it out of Auckland Unlimited and putting it into some other entity.
It's in the options, and I'm sure we'll get that back. I'm absolutely convinced that you are going to come up with a...
I have one other question.
Well, hang on, I'll go to Councillor Turner.
No question, Mr Mayor.
So the other question I've got, and I'm assuming this is part of the meeting to bring it up, is an item that goes to funding, amongst other things, for the Hibiscus Coast Youth Centre. And we have a circumstance, once again, where funding for youth centres across the region is not being dealt with equitably. So are you going to have options for all of the youth centres in this proposal? Because the background is that this particular youth centre is owned and run by the community as compared to other youth centres that are owned and run by the council at considerably higher cost and other mixed models. So are we going to have a fair do for this particular option and convey that information so that if we're going to treat one unfairly, we should treat the others unfairly as well?
Question is, do I want to treat people unfairly? And the answer is no, I don't. But I'm sure in the consultation those things will be raised. I mean, I'm trying to get a budget of several $1 billion for 10 years going here, and we've now descended into a fairly small
my concern,
thing.
Mr Mayor, and it goes to my question, it goes to information that you're putting out. If you're going to put out information and consult, you need to inform. And to date, the information that we convey around consultation that goes to these issues is woefully inadequate because people are not aware of how youth centres are treated in general, and they should be.
We've now got through all the questions on item 9. And it's been moved and seconded. And which is, and you've got, go back to what the recommendation is, please. Okay, we have a recommendation. You want me to read the whole thing out, or you want to read it yourselves? Everyone's got a hard copy of the recommendation. It's been moved and seconded.
Mr Mayor, I just have one small amendment, and that was at F Roman 4, where it reads currently average rates increase limit of 1.5% above inflation. I'm wondering if it's agreeable for you to incorporate 1.5% above the council rate of inflation, which takes into account the construction indices, which drives us more than the CPI. And that's in keeping with the narrative in your proposal.
Well, I mean, it could be the inflation of rubber boats for all I care at this stage of the evening.
So it would read the council above the council rate of inflation.
I mean, I think if you
If I
like,
could,
if you really
provide-
feel that that's important, but I mean, the rate of inflation that the people out there are worried about is the rate of inflation of what they're dealing with, not you. So I think we should leave it at rate of inflation, and then we can have a squabble over that at some time in the future. I mean, the thing is that when the press who are present write about the rate of inflation, they're not identifying which particular one, and it might be 0.2% different from one to the other, but we talk about the rate of inflation as what affects people's ability to pay the bills rather than what the council's rate of inflation is. So I think it, if you, yeah.
I was going to support that position just on the basis that it's really difficult to come up, as we've already discovered, with the council rate of inflation. It's across, we've shown 8 or 10 different indices that might be valid, and also with respect to any investment fund, it's probably the CPI that might be more relevant within that space. So if we leave it as a broad parameter, I think that enables us to consider it more deeply over time.
Okay, you've got the rest of your stuff in there, so we'll leave it at rate of inflation. Do you want me to read the whole thing? No, you can all read the whole thing through. How do you want to go about this? You ready to just do the whole thing, or?
No, we've got a speaker.
Oh, Alf Filipino. Oh, I should have known.
Thank you, Chair. I have sent an amendment through. And what I'm going to suggest, and it's up to you as Chair, is that we adjourn for a few minutes, and then I would then, it may actually be something that you and the mover may not incorporate, but may end up doing. If that's if it is, fine. If it's not, I will then put the amendment through. So if you want to do that, if not, we'll just go straight into the amendment.
Well, I haven't actually seen the amendment yet, so if
no,
there's
that's
one
why
floating
I'm
around, we'll adjourn for
suggesting
5
that,
minutes while you give it to me,
yeah,
and then I can
that's all.
see.
I was going to then talk to yourself.
Adjourn for 5 minutes, thank you.
Fletcher. Kia ora.